Our resident vet, Des Groome, is here laughing at me. I asked him, did he see anything flashing in the sky? And he reckons I'm insane, perhaps.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, Will, was there an unidentified flying object seen over Offaly?
Well, seen over Laois as well and parts of Kildare. So,
Okay.
but it might just be lightning.
Did anybody ask NASA what they were at?
It could be. It could be the US government. It could be the IMF.
They might have sent a stealth vehicle over to assess the landscape.
They could be, yeah.
Figure out just
trying
how
to find out the true value of the country.
are the lights on.
Exactly, that's it. The IMF are seeing if you're leaving the lights on at night and wasting electricity. Tell you, we figure things out here in a heartbeat. All right, Des is here for one reason, and it's time for this.
Pets Corner on Midlands 103 with Groome Pet Vets Kildare and Port Arlington. Expert pet care you can trust every day.
At 083 30 10 103 is our text line if you have a question. First listener has a very small puppy, 8 weeks old, and they're wondering what's the best type of food to give. That's the first part. Double
Good.
barrel question.
Food,
though.
yes.
The second part relates to toilet training. So start with food.
Okay, fair enough. Look, he's just weaned away from the bitch, so he needs to be. We need to just introduce a nice, plain, simple puppy dry food for him to get used to. You can soften it a little with water, perhaps lukewarm water in the early stages, but he should be used to solid food. There shouldn't be a problem feeding him a normal, standard puppy dry diet. So that's what I would look for, and you can use any one of a variety of different brands as long as it's puppy dry diet. Now, you may have to mix a little soft food, a little soft puppy food through it, but usually it's not essential. If he takes to the kibble, the chewy nut, then that by itself is enough. 4 feeds a day. Check the bag for the weight of the dog, the age of the dog, and the amount of it that he should be getting per day. Then divide that by 4 and feed 4 little feeds. Generally, you're talking about no more than a very small handful. A smaller puppy would eat just maybe an egg cupful per day. A larger puppy, maybe perhaps a larger handful, but 3 to 4 times a day, divide it out. Now, the second question is regards to toilet training.
Toilet training at that age.
One of the things, of course, the feeding routine is linked to toilet training. Be consistent when you feed. Feed them at the same time every day. That's important. Let them out to go to the toilet immediately before and immediately after food time. That's very important. Another thing that's useful is why not get the dog from the word go, get them used to from day one, get them used to being fed outside. They must learn to appreciate the distinction between our meal times and their meal times, and they also must learn to associate toilet activities with the great outdoors, because remember, if you train them onto newspaper, you then have another job in training them to go to the back door. So best to start with convincing them from the word go that the place for the toilet is outside, and one thing that's helpful in regard to that is to feed them outside. Now, that's the whole daytime thing. The nighttime. The training crates are great. These are the collapsible cages that you can buy in the pet superstores. Almost all puppies, I believe, should have their bed in a training crate and be confined to a crate at night, so they learn to sleep and relax and settle for the 8 to 9 hours overnight in one place. They will also learn to hold their water overnight and wait till the morning before going to the toilet. They will rarely wet their own bed. That's an important thing. So if they're in a training crate, they're more likely to learn to train themselves not to do the business inside and wait to be let out in the morning. The final thing in regard to that, they don't need water overnight. Okay, if you leave
water overnight.
No, if you leave a water bowl in with them, let them have a drink at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, and then go outside 9 p.m. Then go outside and play for a little while, empty themselves, come back in, go to bed. They can survive quite well, just as children and humans and so on. If they're allowed free access to water overnight, there will be accidents. So that's an important thing. So take the water away, take the food away at an early enough stage in the evening, and let them have a chance to empty themselves and do their business outside. And then when you put them to bed, put them to bed. Now, for a week or so, with a puppy as young as 8 weeks of age, you might need to, just as you would with a child, you might need to get them out of bed at half 11, 12 o'clock at night, just before you go to sleep yourself, and put the dog outside just for 2 minutes. And in that way, you're not asking too much of them. You're not asking them to stretch a whole 9 hours without a toilet opportunity. So if they're allowed out at midnight, and they're going to get a chance again then at 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning. So you can just give them a little break at midnight to do that in the early stages. But they should get used to a 9 p.m. to 7 a.m. routine relatively quickly if you follow all the other aspects of the consistent routine.
Keeping a mind to the weather as it is now, leaving dogs in at night in general, adult dogs, mature dogs, sturdy, hardy dogs.
Okay.
Is it worthwhile?
Look, if the dog is an outdoor type and they're used to being out, then all they need is just it's warmth and really shelter and dryness is the important thing. Ventilation, they don't mind a draft or a breeze.
Yeah, but there's a bit more than a draft or a breeze at the moment.
To be fair, yes. In general, they need bedding changed. I think if a dog is an outdoor dog, as long as he has shelter, a good shed, a stable, or a really good, well-sheltered kennel. Now, a lot of those older wooden kennels that, people buy in a garden centre and the same kennel is still there 5 years' time, you may have simply forgotten just how drafty and deteriorated that kennel might become. Have a look at the kennel, and if you've got one of those 4-year-old, 5-year-old type of wooden kennels, bear in mind the wood will be extremely damaged and soaked and sodden, and probably not much benefit to the dog in terms of warmth or dryness at this stage. So you might consider changing the kennel or getting a nice shed. They don't necessarily need central heating and warmth. Ventilation is great, but they must have a roof over their heads and they must have a dry, well-padded bed.
But what about changes in temperature? Because we as humans are told that if you are inside in a warm room and you go outside and then you go back inside, it's the change in temperature that can do damage.
Change in temperature.
Is it the same with dogs?
Very good. It is, Will, yes. In that sort of case, if you've got an indoor type of dog, which is probably 18, 20 hours a day inside, and for all intents and purposes it's a constant human companion and it's an indoor dog, that type of dog will probably need a blanket to go outdoors in this type of weather. Yeah, and people might think that that's pampering or it's overly sentimental, but if it's a proper
blanket
indoor
not
dog,
just for sleeping at night, a blanket whenever he goes out.
Yeah, you know the type of rugs that greyhounds use when they're parading at the greyhound races. They look like a horse rug, for all intents and purposes, a doggy rug. So a little outdoor doggy rug and wrap around the front and wrap under the tummy. A dog that's completely an indoor domestic dog probably should have one of these when they go out in these conditions. If they're only going out,
even if you're bringing him out to run him around the place and get him fairly active.
Yeah, particularly the terrier types which have a short-haired coat. It's not overly fussy to say this, because this is the type of dog that will just shrink inside his shell the minute he steps foot outside the door and literally won't want to go out. But particularly if you have a thin-skinned, short-haired little dog who spends most of his time indoors, if you get him a little rug, his willingness and appreciation of the great outdoors will multiply. You'll see a big change in his habits
What
and
if you have
happiness
a dog
and character.
with a bigger dog, thicker coat?
Bigger, thicker coated dog would tend to be rugged enough to survive in the great outdoors, yes.
Fine. Okay. Let's change gear for a second. We had a text much earlier in the programme from a listener who got their cat neutered 2 months ago. This cat is 1 year and 4 months old.
Is it a male or a female, Will? A tomcat or a queen cat?
Doesn't say.
Okay. Is there a problem with regard to it now?
The problem is behavioural, because since she was neutered, or he was neutered, it started to bite. Is that linked? Or is that just a separate behavioural problem developing anyway?
That's a separate behavioural problem. There's no link in terms of that behaviour and neutering at all. I wouldn't have thought. I'd like to know more about the situation. That's a behavioural problem. It's attention-seeking behaviour. It's play biting that has been let go too far, perhaps, and the cat doesn't know or hasn't learnt what it's allowed to do, what's appropriate and what's not. So you have inappropriate mouthing or play-biting behaviour there going on. That cat is still young. It should be possible to retrain them a little out of that behaviour, but it's going to require probably, firm tone of voice, firm communication to the cat, and put the cat out. Generally, if you banish an animal from the setting, put them out when they behave in a particular way, they get the message. They learn not to do whatever is going to result in them being put out the door.
Mary has noticed her 10-year-old doggy is drinking a lot of water lately, and she's worried it could be the onset of diabetes or something sinister.
It could be, Mary, absolutely. It could be the onset of diabetes. I'd like to know, in addition to the drinking, is your dog passing a lot of urine? That there's a medical collection of symptoms called polyuria polydipsia, and it's to do with the control of kidney function, the intake of water and the output, the outlet of water. So there's a problem with that. It can indicate diabetes. It can indicate deteriorating renal or kidney function. They'd be the things I think of. And the third set of diseases that are linked to the waterworks would be the glandular conditions. There's a disease called Cushing's where you get the same thing. It's a condition of the adrenal gland. So usually waterworks problems, they're to do with intake and output, renal function, diabetes, adrenal gland function. Having given that background to the whole thing, my final piece of advice to this listener is that dog at this stage of her life needs a trip to the vets, needs some blood tests, needs to have that investigated.